Welcome back to chilling fireside stories, where shadows come to life in the flicker of the fire, and the echoes of the past find their way into the present. Tonight we journey to Sweden, to a quiet Stockholm neighborhood in the early 1930s. What started as a typical night turned into a horrifying mystery that would baffle investigators for decades. This is the story of the Atlas vampire, one of Sweden's darkest unsolved cases, where a killer vanished into thin air, leaving behind a chilling ritualistic crime scene. Was this the work of a disturbed individual or something even more sinister? Settle in, grab your warm blanket, and join me by the fire as we dive into one of the eeriest tales in Swedish history. To truly understand the Atlas vampire case, we need to go back to Stockholm in the 1930s. It was a time of great uncertainty. The world was still reeling from the Great Depression, and Sweden, while more insulated from the economic collapse than some other countries, was not immune. Joblessness was on the rise and social tensions were simmering just below the surface. Stockholm itself, however, was a beautiful city. Known for its old buildings, winding cobblestone streets, and proximity to the water, it was a city where tradition met modernity. People lived close to their neighbors in tightly packed apartment blocks, much like the one where our story takes place. But despite the picturesque surroundings, the Atlas area was not untouched by crime. As economic hardship grew, so too did desperation, and the city's police force found themselves stretched thin by the rising crime rate. It was in this setting that one of the strangest and most horrifying crimes in Swedish history occurred. Lilly Lindeström was a 32-year-old woman, living alone in a modest apartment in the Atlas neighborhood. The name may not be immediately familiar, but for those who study true crime, Lilly's fate is both chilling and tragic. Lilly was known as a quiet woman who largely kept to herself. She wasn't someone who stood out in a crowd. Her neighbors described her as friendly but private, not prone to gossip or unnecessary interaction. Lilly worked in the only way she could to support herself during these tough economic times. She was known to have regular clients who would visit her at her home. Lilly did what she could to survive in the economic difficulties of the time. She was careful, but on the night of her murder, that caution wasn't enough. On May 4, 1932, Lilly's neighbors became concerned. They hadn't seen her in several days, and her apartment, typically alive with movement, was disturbingly quiet. Stockholm's neighborhood life was one of routine, and when those routines were disrupted, people noticed. Concerned neighbors knocked on her door but received no answer. The days dragged on, and the eerie silence from Lilly's apartment began to feel ominous. Eventually, one of her neighbors, a woman named Mimi, called the police. When authorities arrived and forced their way inside, what they found shocked them to their core. The scene inside was not just that of a murder but something much darker. Lilly was found lying face down on her bed, and while this was tragically typical of violent crime scenes, the discovery of a blood-stained ladle nearby took this case into more terrifying territory. Upon further investigation, it became clear that Lilly's murder was unlike anything the police had seen. Her body showed signs that the killer had drained her blood. This by itself was strange and disturbing enough, but the presence of the ladle implied something far more horrifying. It appeared that the murderer had collected her blood in the ladle, perhaps even consuming it, giving rise to the infamous nickname, the Atlas vampire. What's even more unnerving is the relative tidiness of the scene. There was no sign of a significant struggle. It appeared as if Lilly had let her killer in, perhaps someone she knew and trusted. The brutality of the act contrasted sharply with the cleanliness of the room, adding a chilling, calculated layer to the crime. The police were baffled. The idea of a person engaging in such macabre behavior, possibly drinking the blood of their victim, was something out of nightmares. Even in a time of rising crime rates, this case stood out for its sheer abnormality. The investigation into Lilly Lindeström's murder was swift but frustratingly fruitless. The authorities questioned her clients, neighbors, and anyone else who might have had contact with her. While there were many visitors to her apartment in the days leading up to her death, none of the interviews led to any solid leads. Even the forensic investigation, rudimentary as it was by today's standards, couldn't provide clear answers. There were no usable fingerprints, no signs of a break-in, and no concrete evidence to link anyone to the crime. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. One thing the investigators were sure of, however, was that this was not the work of an ordinary murderer. The ritualistic nature of the crime pointed to someone with deep psychological issues or a dark obsession. The Atlas vampire case was not just a crime of passion or a robbery gone wrong. It was something much more sinister. As with any unsolved case, speculation began to run rampant. Some believed that the Atlas vampire was a disturbed individual, perhaps suffering from a severe mental illness that drove them to commit such a bizarre and violent act. Others speculated that the killer might have been involved in occult practices or even belonged to a cult. There were those who believed that Lilly's murder was part of a series of ritualistic killings, though no other cases quite matched the Atlas vampire's unique and disturbing features. Was this an isolated incident, or was there a pattern of crimes that went unnoticed by the authorities? Some speculated that the murderer could have been a regular client of Lilly's, someone who had become obsessed with her over time. Others believed it might have been a complete stranger, someone who had meticulously planned the crime. But despite these theories, no solid suspects ever emerged. The Atlas vampire case may have gone cold, but its impact on Swedish society, and indeed the world, remains significant. This case inspired countless discussions, documentaries, and even theories that border on the supernatural. Was the murderer truly human, or was there something darker at play? To this day, the Atlas vampire remains one of Sweden's most talked about unsolved cases. True crime enthusiasts, paranormal investigators, and historians alike continue to speculate about the identity of the killer. Some believe that modern forensic technology could finally crack the case. But until then, the Atlas vampire will remain one of the darkest mysteries in Scandinavian history. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is that we will likely never know what really happened on that dark night in 1932. Was it a one-time crime by a disturbed individual, or was it the work of someone far more calculated, someone who got away with the perfect crime? Thank you for joining me tonight by the fire for this unsettling tale. The Atlas vampire case remains a mystery that may never be solved, but its chilling details continue to fascinate and terrify those who hear it. What do you think happened that night in 1932? Do you have your own theories, or do you believe we will never truly know the truth? Let me know in the comments below. Your thoughts could lead to more stories we tell together. And if you have a suggestion for a mystery or haunting that you'd like to hear next, don't hesitate to drop it in the comments. I'm always looking for the next eerie tale to share with you. Before you go, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the chilling stories I have in store. There's always another tale around the corner and you won't want to miss it. Until next time, stay curious, stay cozy, and I'll see you by the fire.